Wanderer, we finally get a good developer interview with real answers about Season 11. And I got everything compiled for you with timestamps so you can check it up yourself, but we're gonna go over the real interesting pieces. Like monsters dropping 800% more gold, and the pit tier scaling being nerfed so everyone can get their glyphs leveled up. But let's start at the top with the leveling curve and difficulty adjustment. What they were aiming for is to slow down the early 20 levels but make the later levels more rewarding by actually having people play on the higher difficulties and taking our skill points away. That actually did succeed, and it didn't slower leveling in total. I leveled actually at the PDR and it was a good feeling. The first 20 levels were somewhat slower, but you were earning back your skill points as you were going with it, zero to hero journey with a seasonal rank, and it did feel good. However, due to the missing skill points, you were somewhat weaker, and bosses in dungeons and or hell tides could feel weird. And that's why they have been lowering the HP of bosses wholesale, especially dungeon bosses, maybe the Helltide commanders popping up, and even the tormented bosses later on, which is actually needed, because with the missing power of the temporary and masterworking, Torment 4 bosses did feel awkward. All of this is being adjusted for Season 11 to fit in the new reality of the then player power. Also, capstone bosses are being made more interesting instead of just being damage sponges, because that's a problem we're facing. You go in a capstone dungeon, you do the boss, and you take like 20 minutes to kill him. Resilience gone, more interesting encounter with mechanics you maybe have to dodge, however, not just 4 billion HP. They quickly gloss over the enchanting system, because enchanting is quite awkward. You only get 2 outcomes, and sometimes you have to reroll 400 times to get what you're looking for, especially with amulets. That's pain. My solution would be as simple: give us 3 options. When I press the enchant button to change an affix, instead of just 2 options to choose from, give us 3. That already widens the pool of possible things, or at least make it fair, because the skill ranks are not rolling as often as max health or anything else. There is a hidden weighting going on. Even though the devs are saying there's not, there is. I have rerolled enough to know this. Therefore, make it fair or give us 3 options. Thank you. Now, sanctification is something we're all happy or mad about. One thing we're all mad about is that items could be turned indestructible in the sanctification, which is the most useless outcome. You could get a bonus affix, a bonus aspect, you could get a new greater affix, and then your item could turn indestructible. Great. That is being removed, and a new different power creep is being added. Also, the higher quality an item is, the fewer bad outcomes it should have. Which means if you put a 3 or 4 greater affix item in, it's going to always be a good outcome, maybe? The big plan is to avoid super power creep and put in some fun things that could happen, some good things that could happen, but not to make it the absolute super mandatory. If you don't have this, you sting. Which actually is quite happening, because you could get a bonus aspect. We'll see how the final system is, but already removing the indestructible makes it more interesting, because I can't just get a super dud outcome from the final step of my item's journey. Game mechanics and balance. Toughness is being reviewed, because they screwed it up. They gave us a new defense system that's shit. However, what they're changing is that they're planning to add a recommended toughness display to say in Torment 4, you should at least have 80,000 toughness. In Torment 2, 50,000 is enough. That's at least something to work with, instead of just being here in the open and like, what am I supposed, like, how much is good? Right? Can I jump into Torment 4 now? Do I have to run into mobs and start dying to figure out if I have enough? The same is happening to the attack power stat. It's being changed to only display weapon damage. We could remove attack power at this point because it's misleading players. Players are coming to me and they're like, I have 1,000,000 attack power, but I can't do Torment 4. And I'm like, I have 2,000 attack power and I do 1,000,000,000,000 damage. And they're like, what the fuck? Attack power being removed is exactly what we need. And then toughness to be displayed butter on top. Quite nifty. Monster damage scaling is being adjusted, and this one is for high tier players, because right now after pit 100 monsters don't do more damage. So in order to go higher than pit 100, you only had to take more damage. Nothing was changing about the gameplay. However, they're looking to actually make monsters after pit 100 do more damage continuously, incrementally in the bounds of the game, so not just make them hit you like the Abattoir of Zur back in the days. And that's quite intriguing, because you still have to find the balance between defense and damage to then keep climbing, instead of just more damage, just more damage, just more damage. And one of my favorite changes, probably, the Bile Eyes in the pit. Those are the new Belial Isles that you had to pop, and then you could fight Belial at the end for a bonus glyph upgrade. They will now auto-activate. it was kind of awkward to walk up to them and have to click them. It was actually throwing you out of your bear form, and it just gets you out of the flow of the combat, right? Because you wanted to fight Belial at the end of the pit. It will auto-pop as you walk up to them, and you get bonus monsters then to kill for more pit progress, plus you fight Belial at the end. Awesome. After the Torment system and map generation, the XP nerf in the PTR was a bug. There was somewhere where you didn't get the maximum HP possible, and XP rewards will be staying the same. We're looking at you, maggots, actually dropping bonus XP massively in the Helltide. That's going to be very nice for leveling. The current Torment system can feel like a feast or famine. What they're talking about is that you either reach Torment 4 or you're fucked, right? If you're in Torment 3, you get less loot. If you're in Torment 2, you get less loot, and that feels bad. They're looking into maybe more Torment tiers down the line in order to smooth the journey, because the jump from 3 to 4 is quite extraordinary. I like the jump because you really have to put in the efforts. However, a lot of people feel like they're stuck in Torment 3 and being punished for it. So if we had like Torment 3 and then 4 and then 5 and then the no Torment 4 is 6, for example, to give people a smoother journey, this would do nothing for high-end players. It would do everything for the casual player to more gradually get eased into it instead of bam bam, this is the new reality, deal with it. Then the map generation in the pit will be improved to reduce backtracking issues. Thank you. Because at this current point, sometimes monsters don't spawn if there's too narrow tunnels, dead ends, whatever, and you might have to actually go back all the way to the other portal to then really kill things. Awkward as hell. Tower and pit experience, they're pretty much just talking about the tower currently being work in progress. It doesn't have any rewards, and they're looking forward to create rewards that are not making you stronger, that just make you stand out. Like halos, for example, down here, that are going to be placeable on your characters so people see, wow, he's a Tower 100 clearer, which I kind of like, because if you then want to put in the work to actually clear a high-level tower, getting a cosmetic item for it is nifty, and I think it's earned. If it is then solo self-found, again, I'll say it, if you earn this by trading, if you earn this by buying equipment from Chinese market websites for real money, that's not earned, right? So these halos should only be introduced if we then have solo self-found to really see, wow, that player did it. My humble opinion. Now to the class balance and competitive play. The team is committed to ensure leaderboard integrity and focusing on making the game competitive place with plans to introduce solo self-found. Again, mentioned of solo self-found to really make this a good environment and not something where you're like, first 20 names Chinese. We all know how they get their gear. By the way, this is no hate against Chinese. I'm sorry, but the real money trading is coming from over there and the items are coming from over there. I'm not hating, please. No racism. Thank you. The biggest point from this whole interview is going to be the lowering of pit tiers. Current builds were kind of stuck at pit 70, 75, maybe 80 if you were lucky. And they're looking to improve every single build in the game by 5 to 10 pit tiers by reducing the pit scaling. So everyone has a chance to, with a good gear set, with good items, sanctification, whatsoever, reach pit 100 and beyond, that you can actually get your glyphs to 100, that you don't feel like, oh man, my build, if it's not super S tier meta, is not happening. So pit tier scaling going down is definitely going to go nicely, because right now we could reach like pit 90 if we already had everything 100, if we had triple masterwork gear and mythics and all that kind of stuff. Thank you. This will go a long way. Their kind of aim is that every build can finish around 80, 85, with obviously top end equipment and super ultra S tier builds going higher. And I think that's a good ballpark for now. Then a mention to the teleport feature being removed, that Sorceress players could not just go like bum 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 like crazy. And the idea behind this is that, well, Sorceress is overperforming everything in terms of speed farming, and other builds are completely left in the dust like Necromancer and Druid. The idea here would be to maybe remove the movement speed cap and make everything move faster. Because right now you have 200% movement speed. You can't get above that, right? But if we could go above 200 movement speed, that'd be nice. It might look silly animation-wise, though, because if you're suddenly your character's like... However, any speed boost to Necro and Druid is appreciated. Build diversity and mechanics. And here, a big point is, yes, Chaos Power could come back as aspects and similar down the line. We know Chaos Armor is gone. Balancing Chaos Armor could have been difficult. I still disagree. However, they're really looking into powers like Savagery that made a whole Druid build actually functional. Bring that back later. It would still feel cheap because we already had it. It was nice. We really enjoyed it. That being said, I wouldn't mind. Like, this would just be great. There are a couple of powers that are so outstanding, and they gave us so much more to do. When it comes down to Chaos Armor, the game balance was a concern. Because if we keep Chaos Armor, then everyone would use the same Chaos Armor and the build diversity would go down. On one point, they're not completely wrong because everyone was playing the Banishment's Talisman and the Crown of Lucian and that kind of stuff. On the other hand, they were playing this because they were enabling builds and finally allowed them to work. However, their big point out is here that if all the Chaos Armors are available, then no one is going to look anymore for defensive pieces and all the defensive aspects become useless and no one is going to look anymore for toughness. And then they can't actually scale HP or damage in a meaningful way and make encounters more difficult because everyone is going to play Chaos Armors and then they're not properly defensive enough. And then if they make encounters more difficult, then people can't wear their Chaos Armor and so on. That's at least what they're saying and why they did what they did. Maybe it's going to appease the one or the other of us to at least have a reason beyond we just didn't know better. Now, a big quality of life change to address the gold shortage, and the gold shortage exists. I won't be told different. Especially when you're re-rolling, it can be pain, right? If I want to enchant something, I just lose all my gold. Monsters will drop 800% more gold, and elites can potentially drop up to 15 gold piles. So generally speaking, the gold amount is going to go up, and that's great. Plus, we're going to give powers, the divine gifts from the season, to get more gold from the pit. That should also go a long way. And at the very end, they're hinting at you should be watching the Game Awards. And there was an interview with Brent Gibson, one of their guys in China, where he also said watch the Game Awards. So I reckon that at the Game Awards, we might finally get expansion news. It's about time. BlizzCon is around the corner. BlizzCon should be happening, right? In November somewhere, December, I don't even know. So Game Awards, BlizzCon, next year expansion, the marketing gotta start. Have an eye out for that. Thank you, Rob, for the interview. This one was definitely on the better side. It gave us real answers and not just some mambo jambo. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice to hear the insights of developers' minds. But on top of the insights, I want real concrete things, right? Thank you. Now go watch this video on top or I'll hunt you in your dreams.